Hey, Cameron here with the Seabutters Tech Channel, and we are going to be looking at the Ender 5 S1. Now, this is a newer printer that has come out recently. The Ender 5, though, itself is not new. The Ender 5's been around for quite a long while. What that gives you is a more rigid frame. It's similar to the Ender 3. It looks like a Core XY printer, but it's not quite a Core XY printer. It still has the X-axis on its own motor rail here. The difference is, rather than the bed slinger going back and forth, you actually have the bed raise and lower rather than the carriage raising and lowering. But the more rigid frame allows it to advertise 250 millimeters per second, which should make it quite a bit faster than something like a traditional Ender 3. So we're going to go ahead and unbox and see how easy this thing is to build. Now, the other unique thing I'll be doing with this one is I'm going to be throwing this on it, the Creality Sonic Pad, which is a clipper. It has a clipper firmware built in, which allows you to use a sensor to measure the resonance on the frame, which actually lets you print faster, even faster than you could just with the printer alone. The other thing this will let me do is I also have a couple other Creality printers, and I should be able to control 4 printers at once using this Sonic Pad. So I'm going to play with that a little bit, but the main thing that I'll be reviewing is this Ender 5 S1. So let's go ahead and get it unboxed and see what it looks like. So we've got a quick start guide and starting to get into all the bits and pieces here. So we'll take a look at the quick start guide. We've got a couple stickers here, which I haven't ever seen with Creality devices before. Material guide on heat bed temperatures, nozzle temperatures. This should take some of the guesswork out of printing with different materials. I gotta say, Creality stepped up their game on their packaging. So this is, I had an original CR10 back in the day, and this is way better than anything I got back then. This is high quality. It's kind of glossy. Anyways. So in the box, looks like we've got power cords, accessories, Bowden tubes. Looks like there's a card reader, all the screws and accessories we'll need to assemble. Got our traditional white filament. Got our top bracket, has handles on each side. Have our heated bed. And one thing I'm going to point out is, look at this foam around the side. It is very nicely done. If any of you used early CR10s or maybe even early Enders, these did not stick. They're assembling these much nicer than they ever used to. So we also have our built-in magnetic bed plate, which never came standard back in the day, but definitely does now, so I'm excited to see how well this print surface works out. Got our extrusion rails. Again, everything's very nicely packaged. And last but not least, we have the base. So now we've got everything ready to assemble. The first step is putting the posts on. Another really neat thing is they have all of the screws labeled, stamped to tell you exactly which screws are which. In this case, we're using the M5 by 25 with the spring-loaded washer. The number 1 posts go in the front. The number 2 frame goes on the back, right. And I'm just initially putting these on quite loosely. While these are still loose, I'm going to be installing the top piece. By leaving it loose initially on all the screws, you're going to allow it to become much more square as you slowly work through each of the screws, tightening them down. Now that I have all the bolts snug, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to tighten these down slowly and on opposing ends. So I'll do this end, this end, this end, this end, and then this end, in order to really make sure this thing's going together. It's square, it's rigid. So that's just a tip to keep everything super square. And just want to say, this thing, I mean, my table's wobbly. This thing is super rigid. I'm very happy with the finish on the extrusions and how accurately this came together to create a solid cube. The next step we're going to do is we're going to set this to the side for a moment. We're going to use some of the foam from the package, put the bed onto the Z-axis. We're still using the same 25mm screw. You probably want to be holding this by the black parts. You probably don't want to be touching the rods as they are pre-greased. Okay, at this point we're going to turn the whole assembly upside down, and you're also going to be using these bracket M5x20 screws. So because this is upside down, you're actually going to be putting the left one on the right side from the camera angle view. These brackets are interchangeable. They're interchangeable, but you do want the indented side down. Then you have two remaining screws. They're going to go and hook the arm to the bed. And once you have those screws tightened in, you can snug the rest. We can take this off, clear our working area. Now, you can take the bed plate, shift it up here, loop it underneath the rod here, and then tilt the motor underneath, and then let the whole thing drop down slowly. There. It all slides into place quite nicely. And you can line up your screw holes, which there are 4 of, and it uses the 30mm screw. And it definitely does help to have this on the edge of a table or something like that. And again, don't tighten down one of these first. Get all of them in the sockets loosely, and then once all the holes are definitely lined up correctly, you can then start to tighten it down. It's also not a bad idea to kind of make sure that it's all squared up. There's no bias to one side. It's just all proper and even. And this is the time you want to, you know, be careful during assembly. I won't say you get one shot at this, but the more careful and more square that you install everything, the better your overall prints are going to be. So just take your time. And with these screws, as far as tension, you want them snug, fairly tight, but you don't want to over tighten them either. Okay, so at this point things are starting to look pretty good. Some 45-degree angle brackets. Now these brackets go on the back, and there is a bias on each of these. So there is a groove. So one is for the left side and one is for the right side. And you'll be using the 25mm screw that does not have the spring-loaded washer. Okay, now we're going to be installing the spool holder. We want to be using the 17mm screw. These actually use. For this step, it's actually easier if you leave it loose and get both screws in. And then this topper has little tabs that go in and out, but it's going to go through on this side, and you can tighten that down. At this point, we're going to do the cable management and deal with the electronics. First thing, depending on your region where you're at, you're going to want to set your dip switch on the power supply to either 230 or 115 volt. I'm in the US, so I'm going to switch that over. Very important, don't forget that. The first thing we're going to do is connect, and you've got two little wires here. There's one is a 6-pin and the other is a 3-pin, so pretty easy up here to know where to go. There are little notches on the pins, so they do need to go the right way. The notches fit into the socket, very easy. Same with the 3-pin, make sure you put it in the correct angle. We're going to find the D cable, which is the filament detection line. And now we're going to connect the extruder kit, which comes up the top here. You can open up the tabs, and then note that it does have a tabbed end. You want to insert it the right way. You don't want to bend any of these little pins. Insert it until the pins snap into place, and then you can tuck the ribbon cable into the wire guide. So at this point we're going to hook up the Y-axis. There is another 6-pin and 3-pin cable. You want to come in from the bottom of the extrusions, not above the extrusion. And then there's also the 3-pin on the side here. This one's a little tricky to reach. There we go. We'll do some cable management in a minute here. So we need to connect the hotbed cable. The last wire is for the Z motor. Now we're going to install the Teflon tubing from the filament sensor to the hot end. For cable management, I'll point out a few things. You have zip tie clips here, here, and here. And those zip ties are included in the package. And then we also have 5 of these rail clips. And there's going to be 5 of those. There's going to be 3 on this rail and 2 on this rail. This is the easiest example to show. So you're going to take the hotbed wire, and this is going to be on the inside. Okay, so it's easiest to see right there from another angle. Alright, now let's handle our cable management for all these cables. The detection cable, it needs to go around this side of the Bowden tube, so keep that in mind. So I just pulled that out to reconnect it. We'll use these clip harnesses, 1 low, 2 high. So there's also this little harness clip, and that should be used to connect the Bowden tube. This wire right here needs to be zip tied down. We'll do that with the 3 zip tie points that I pointed out earlier. Probably not a bad idea to leave these loose initially until we're sure that the printer has full range of motion. And then once we are at the furthest point that the printer is away, then we can tighten those down. With the cable management out of the way, we can now power it on for the first time. SD card that it came with, and put it in here. Let's flip it on and see how we did. So we're just letting it home. Looks pretty good. We're gonna adjust the bed now. However, I first want to bring the hotbed all the way down to make sure that all the cables look good. So the max Z volume is 280, so you can actually just dial in 280. And you can see this ribbon cable can come up a little bit more to give it a little bit more room, but that looks good. I want to also make sure that these cables look good even when this print head is the furthest over here that it could possibly be. So let's do that right now. So we're at the max point away from it. All these wires look good, so I'm just going to tighten down the zip ties and 100% complete. Okay, once that's preheated, what I'm going to do is level the bed and make sure everything looks great. Okay, so when you're at the home menu, you can check the temperatures, the speed it's printing, the Z height. In order to level the bed, what I'm going to do is click Settings, and then there is a leveling method button. And click leveling method, and at that point okay, so now it is trying to rest the head of the device. And I'm going to be pressing these keys down here to move it up and down to adjust the Z height. So for example, I can move the bed up slightly. And I'll do this until I see that the nozzle is directly on the bed. And I can actually use this piece of paper to see when it is as close as possible. Okay, once I start to feel drag on the paper, I know that we've hit the bed. So, and then I'm just going to back it off slightly until I can just barely feel the pressure. So for us here, that was at negative 1.79. That your number will be different, but now I'm going to check the front left, and that made it move to the front left. And I'm going to drag my paper again, but this time I'm going to adjust the screw wheel that's underneath here, and if I need to, I will tighten it up. Now, in order to tighten the bed to the nozzle, you might think you crank this down like you would a screw. You actually loosen it to raise the bed. And once I see that it's touching exactly like it felt when it was in the center, that's where I want it to be. So loose, and then just feel the slight touch. Okay? Now, I'm going to do all four corners. And done. So now that it's been manually leveled, you can actually go into the auto leveling settings and click a start on that. And by doing this, not only manually leveling the bed, but automatically leveling the bed, it's actually going to check several different points on the bed and make a map of the bed itself, and it should result in much better first layers. So this is the final step in being finally ready to print. Alright, so loading this printer is pretty easy. Just put your spool on the holder, run it up through the filament sensor, open the clip on the top as you push the filament through, and you're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and do a test print, and let's see how it works. So looking at this Benchy, it actually looks pretty amazing. Took exactly 1 hour to print. But yeah, the quality looks really, really good. So I hope that helps you get set up with your first print on the Creality Ender 5 S1. In the next video I do on this printer, I'll be comparing it to some of the other printers I have here in the 3D Print Lab. I have several in here. I've got Prusa's K3S's, I have the Ender S1 Pro, I've got a Creality CR10S Pro, and even have that Anchor Make down here. So I'm curious to see with the Clipper firmware whether this Ender 5 can compete with that. So if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.